Hello fellow collectors, I hope you are doing very well indeed. Today we continue with my ongoing series where I'll talk about the best films I watched in the preceding month, and today we're going to take a look at my February in film. February was a pretty good month for me overall, where I watched some good old classics as well as some new releases too. I was in a very lucky position where I still had quite a lot of annual leave left to take, and so I took a week off in February and managed to get myself to the cinema a few times as well, which was absolutely wonderful. I even went to an old favourite of mine that I hadn't been to in ages, which is the Curzon in Camden, which is located under these great big railway arches, and it's absolutely brilliant. I always love going there, and it's still such a great place to be, even if the film I did see was quite a stressful one to say the least. Well, I think that's more than enough of a preamble, so let's dive right into things and talk about the best films I watched in February. First up, and we have a bit of a cult classic by now, which is Memento. From the year 2000 and directed by Christopher Nolan, based off a short story of course by his brother, Jonathan Nolan. This one stars Guy Pearce, Joe Pantoliano, Carrie-Anne Moss and Mark Boone Jr. A great character actor that you'd recognise probably from 100 things but might not be able to name. Now, I've not actually read this book yet, but it is on my list to get to, but often when I think of the films of Christopher Nolan, it makes me think of the title of Andrei Tarkovsky's book, Sculpting in Time, as that's what Christopher Nolan seems to be so interested in, playing around with time and non-linear structure through the medium of cinema, and it's undeniably fascinating. In Memento, we have a story about a man who has no short-term memory following an accident. So he remembers his whole life up until that point, but from the time of the accident he can't make any new memories, so he can't ever get to know anyone new or remember where he was even just a short while ago. He repeats himself often, telling the same people the same things time and again, because for him it's always the first time they've met. Of course, it's an intolerable way to live, and so he takes pictures and writes himself notes, and the really important stuff he tattoos on himself so he'll never forget. And this is a man that is on a journey to try to find his wife's killer. She's been murdered, and despite his condition, he will stop at nothing to try to find out who did it and take revenge. In this mix, we have a motel owner, a cop, a barmaid, and her boyfriend. Now, I'm sure lots of us will have seen it at this point, but there is a great video where Christopher Nolan himself takes us through the film's structure, as it flutters between scenes in colour and scenes in black and white. For me, often I find that I have a bit of a problem with gimmicks in filmmaking, or let me be more generous and call them experiments from directors. I still don't like Lars von Trier's Dogville as much as many others because the gimmick of not having any sets or locations grew pretty tiresome for me after a short while. In similar fashion, telling a story by having one part going backwards and the other part going forwards, while certainly a novel idea, because doing this actually means that the film ends, and hopefully this isn't really a spoiler to anyone who hasn't seen it, but it ends somewhere in the middle of the actual linear story. Because of that, it just lacks something for me. However, watching this one actually made me think of Ian Banks' incredible sci-fi novel I read last year called Use of Weapons, which also tells a story going forwards and a story going backwards throughout the book, and it interweaves them together. The film, of course, is just telling the one complete story, but it gave me a similar feeling when watching and reading, and I can certainly recommend the book if you're interested. Despite this way of telling the story though, this is brilliant and compelling stuff. I'm a big fan of Guy Pearce, and I think his filmography reflects so many interesting and left-field choices. And I have no idea whether this is true or not, but I feel like maybe he could have been Hollywood royalty if he wanted to, but he instead seems to have chosen a more varied and interesting career. Pearce plays things very calmly in this film, which is so unusual for a thriller of this nature. But of course, how can he ever know when the stakes are at their highest? Even if he does know for a moment, he forgets just a short while later. There is one fantastic scene where he's running and someone else is running as well, and he doesn't know whether he's being chased or if he's doing the chasing, though of course he soon finds out. Another fantastic and pretty heartbreaking scene is where he's with Carrie-Anne Moss, and she says something along the lines of, "I can say whatever I want to you. I could call you X, Y and Z and you won't have a clue a while later." It's a really powerful scene to say the least. He can't know if he's on the right track, if he's perhaps being manipulated. Who really are these people in his life at the moment, and what are their motivations? This is a film that very much keeps you on your toes and does keep you guessing. Through the black and white flashbacks we get a wider picture of events leading up to the truth, but through the parts in colour, Nolan does a great job of putting you in our main character's shoes, as Weir as baffled as the character must be, to begin with at least. It's just a great mystery thriller, this one, and I really enjoyed revisiting it after so many years. I've also been a fan of Joe Pantoliano since I first saw him in Congo, where he plays a hilarious and very quotable character that me and my family still quote to this day. So I always love seeing him in things, and as usual he is great here, as the cop whose allegiances you question throughout. I remember I bought the DVD from HMV, I think probably back in 2013, and I haven't actually seen it since then, so it was really great to get a chance to see this one again, and I'm delighted that it holds up. And no, it's a shame that this wasn't a 4K release. 101 Films have done a really lovely job here with their excellent limited edition that came out just a couple years ago. Next up, and we have Witness. From 1985 and directed by Peter Weir, it stars Harrison Ford, Kelly McGillis, Jan Rubes, Lucas Haas, Joseph Summer, and many more. Despite his fame, there remains quite a lot of Harrison Ford's films that I've not seen yet, and some that I've not seen for so long that I've basically forgotten them. But I think I've watched about 25 of his films so far, and so I thought I had a pretty good idea of what a Harrison Ford film is when going into this one. But of course I forgot foolishly about Mosquito Coast, another absolutely brilliant collaboration between Peter Weir and Harrison Ford, and so I should really have known this one wouldn't be a classic action flick or standard police drama, but something a bit different. Indeed, this is another weird and wonderful journey like so many of Peter Weir's other films, and I was really pleasantly surprised. So our story starts with a young Amish boy who's travelling with his mother, who witnesses a murder while they are waiting in a train station. Cue Harrison Ford playing a police detective trying to solve the case, which as it turns out is more complicated than it appears at first glance. Our story then flows between two worlds, the modern world, Ford's world, and the Amish pastoral world of the boy and his mother, played wonderfully by Kelly McGillis, and the tensions therein. There are a couple of instances of clearly stating their laws aren't our laws, this sort of extreme othering. While they may occupy the same space and have to interact with the modern world somewhat, the Amish live in a completely different place. They run their own lives in their own land and govern themselves. A series of events takes Ford to stay with the boy and his mother in Amish country, and you almost forget what the film is about for a while. There is the undeniable allure of simpler living. Community living where neighbours help each other, where barns are raised, where your milk comes from milking your own cows. And Ford plays this wonderfully, engaging in that life, and along with some added romantic tension, the draw of this becomes apparent. There is a superb scene, however, which really highlights the differences, where they've had to go into the local town, and as seems to happen fairly often, the Amish get harassed by some of the locals. Of course, being pacifists, they do nothing, they take no action despite what happens. But the policeman in Ford's character, that sense of justice boils up in him and he takes action. What is a kind-hearted gesture in one way, only does more to highlight the stark difference between them, and it's a powerful moment in the film. This one is a bit of a challenge to talk about more without spoiling the story, so I'll just say that this film was a great mixture of police procedural, action, crime and romance, and is so often a theme for Peter Weir, the coming together of two worlds, something that he always explores beautifully, and here he does the same. I really loved the ending of this one as well. The last thing I'll say about this is that if you're a Stargate SG-1 fan like myself, it was a wonderful surprise to see Jan Rubes, a wonderful Czech-Canadian actor, playing the Amish father in this film, as he appeared in a classic SG-1 episode about giant aliens called Crystal Skull, which I enormously recommend as well. Moving on then, and we have Kids Return. From 1996 and directed by the legendary Takeshi Kitano, this one stars Masanobu Ando and Ken Kaneko. Now this is actually one of the oldest films I had sat in my collection that I hadn't seen yet, heaping shame on me on a daily basis, after having bought it all the way back in March 2022. And so I was really glad to finally watch it and finally tick it off my list. And even more glad because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've watched just a few of Kitano's films so far and really enjoyed them all, with the slight exception of Kikujiro, which I thought was just fine, but to be honest I'm not sure I was quite in the right mood for it. His brand of deadpan dark comedy I think translates excellently, and he just tells interesting stories. Thankfully I was in the perfect mood for Kid's Return though, and it was an odd but compelling journey. Our story follows two school kids, both lazy at school, troublemakers, petty criminal bullies really, but fast friends. On the odd occasion when they are in class, they pay no attention. They are derided by their teachers as morons, and feared and disliked by their fellow students, whom they often beat up or rob. I think a lack of education is a key underlying theme for this film, as it's something that is shown very darkly comedically at times, but also quite powerfully in the subtext as we progress through their journeys. After an event which shows them that they aren't the toughest blokes around, the boys end up joining a boxing gym where one clearly has a natural talent and the other doesn't, and this ultimately leads them on very different paths, but both are destructive and have their fair share of disappointment. When I reached the end of this film, I was left thinking, what was that really about? What was the message here? Both boys get referred to as morons time and again, and so is this just a funny look at the stupidity of youth? I certainly think I could make several films about my own stupidity as a teenager and a younger man. Is it that our natures don't really change? When you fall in with a bad crowd, you're doomed to always repeat it? Or is it that failures are inevitable? Perhaps that is the most likely one, though even that I don't think entirely captures the essence of the film. There is also an added thread that runs through this one, which follows another schoolboy and his hopes of love, which we return to periodically throughout. And I won't spoil what happens there, but this adds a really curious other perspective to the film as well. Well, whatever the message, if indeed there even was one, it was incredibly watchable and engaging. Part boxing movie, part Yakuza movie, and part coming of age. It maybe spends a little bit too long on the boxing stuff. I felt it got slightly bogged down there, but just a very small criticism for another great Kitano film. And this is very much a Takeshi Kitano film, as it has that easygoing, almost meandering feel to it. It's very deadpan and amusing, though hitting on some serious subject matters. He really is a very singular director with a clear voice. That BFI box set of 3 of his films has been on my wish list for the longest time, and I really must pick it up, as I've only seen one from that set, and I'd love to see as much from Kitano as I can. And then lastly, we've got JFK. From 1991 and directed by Oliver Stone, it stars Kevin Costner, Michael Rooker, Laurie Metcalf, J.O. Sanders, Gary Oldman, Sissy Spacek, Wayne Knight, along with lots of smaller roles for the likes of Jack Lemmon, John Candy, Kevin Bacon, Donald Sutherland, and many more. An absolutely enormous and sprawling cast for this one. Now, I'd actually put off watching this one for a while, as it's a pretty long film, and I actually ended up watching the director's cut, which is even longer, at almost 3.5 hours. But my goodness, did this zip along. It was paced perfectly and brilliantly kept my focus. I thought this one was just absolutely excellent. As a big fan of The X-Files, I feel like if you removed the alien aspect, this film feels like just one giant episode. The atmosphere of intrigue, mystery, the government conspiracies, the cover-ups, it's all there in spades, and it's utterly compelling. Adding to that atmosphere, the soundtrack is also excellent, though oddly it's certainly not the sort of music I would usually have put together with this sort of film, but it really did a lot to raise the tension and power of some scenes. The legendary John Williams knocking it out of the park yet again. Obviously, this one is based off the real-life assassination of JFK in 1963, and though I'm sure greatly dramatised, the real subsequent trial of Clay Shaw, who was brought to court by Jim Garrison, the District Attorney of New Orleans, played here by Kevin Costner, which remains, believe it or not, the only trial to be carried out relating to that assassination. It's a really interesting story and history. I actually remember studying this at school for just 1 or 2 lessons, and I remember my teacher back then mentioning that more documents were due to be released in the 2020s, and she might not be around for it, and that stuck with me ever since. And of course in 2025 there were further documents released, and I thought about what she said, and very much hope she is still here and was able to read about it. It might seem a bit odd to say considering how much I enjoyed this one, but I didn't love Costner's performance here. But the story was just so compelling, and it has such a depth in a large cast that the film doesn't sink or swim with him, thankfully. Not to say that he's bad, but it's just miles from his best. However, I thought Michael Rooker's performance was superb, along with J.O. Sanders. Gary Oldman was also perfectly cast as Lee Harvey Oswald, and it was really nice to see Laurie Metcalf in a larger role than I've seen from her before. I was also laughing a lot at John Candy's character, which reminded me a lot of Big Daddy from the Simpsons episode where Chief Wiggum gets a spin-off. Well, I think Joe Pesci's character perfectly sums things up in the film when he quotes from Winston Churchill and says, "It's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. The more layers you peel back, the more it seems there is to peel. Was there really a conspiracy to kill the President of the United States? Was there really more than one shooter? Was Lee Harvey Oswald just a patsy? And with further documents due to be released in the 2060s, I believe, is there still more to this story that we might find out one day?" A big part of this film is about seeking the truth. Costner plays a man bent on uncovering the truth and bringing those responsible to justice. We see clearly played out the toll that this takes on his friends, his family, his marriage, and on those he is working with. The commitment that he demands from them, the singular focus he has, and the dangers that come from this. This is a film that is filled with paranoia, where there could be a shadowy man in black behind every corner ready to silence you. It's an exciting ride and offers up a lot of food for thought, about not only truth and justice, but obsession as well, I think. Interestingly, the film itself did spark renewed interest and investigations when it was released in 1991, and as compelling as much of the evidence is, there is actually a great line that Michael Rooker's character says in the film, that they can't even keep a secret in a room where there's only 12 of them. There's leaks everywhere, and we're supposed to believe in some conspiracy involving the CIA, FBI, the mob, military intelligence that's remained a secret this entire time? Definitely a line which brings things back down to earth. Well, what's the answer to the mystery? Is there even a mystery here? The only thing I can say with absolute certainty was that this was an excellently paced, well crafted, well written and researched and incredibly interesting film. Whatever your takeaway about the actual events, I think the biggest thing I took away from the film is that the truth is worth fighting for. And also, if you're a fan of Alan J. Pakula's films and his Paranoia trilogy, including Clute, All the President's Men and The Parallax View, definitely check this one out if you haven't seen it already, as it'll be right up your street. And if you're a fan of JFK, make sure you check out Alan J. Pakula's films as well. And lastly then, on to just a couple honourable mentions. First up we have Roofman, which, while it's not winning any Oscars, was actually much more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be, with a bit of a weird and wonderful story. And while I'm not the biggest fan of Channing Tatum in serious roles, it's actually not too bad here at all, and Kirsten Dunst is of course fantastic as usual. And then we've got Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, which I was lucky enough to catch at the cinema, which again was a lot of fun to watch, especially on a big screen, but unfortunately I felt like the film fell down in a few places and I wasn't really a fan of the ending of this one. And well, that's everything from me and from my February in film. My goodness, what a rainy month we had. A perfect month to be indoors and watching some great films, and I hope you also watched some fantastic ones. Well, that is everything from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.